You just heard about Iowa's amazing growth of wind power in the last decade, and a lot of this has been due to large wind farms coming in on Iowa. But we also have been a leader in Iowa in another type of wind power production, that is distributed, small-scale, locally owned wind power. And I want to talk a little bit specifically about how Iowa has incentivized distributed wind power. And we've done this for a couple of reasons, because we have recognized the benefits of this type of power to Iowa. We recognize that small-scale, locally owned wind compared to large-scale wind plants owned by out-of-state companies has more benefits for the local economy. More of our revenue stays in the state. We've also done this because it's easier sometimes. Small-scale wind turbines that are distributed across the state don't necessarily require new transmission the way a large wind plant with a lot of turbines might. And then finally, there's the benefit that having these small-scale plants in your communities owned by your school or your business or your neighbor help increase energy awareness and move Iowa forward to a better energy future. Iowa has relied on wind power for a long time. We've already kind of got the history lesson there. But we used to have windmills dotted across the state to help us pump water, and they're still out there. They are kind of falling apart now, but they're a good reminder of the fact that Iowans can produce their own power. And we can do this now with these sleek new turbines that are popping up in Iowa. And so how has Iowa gained distributed wind power? And we've done this through policy, as David has talked about, and that's one of the first things I'm going to talk about is a state incentive for locally owned wind power. And we've also done this through, by having this good policy in place, we've also done this, though, through Iowans taking matters into their own hands and really pushing to get wind turbines up across the state. So first, I'll talk about the state incentive. In 2005, Iowa passed a tax credit for distributed wind power. As the legislation was being considered, we at the Iowa Policy Project wrote a report that looked at the economic benefits of locally owned small-scale wind power versus large-scale wind power owned by out-of-state companies. And we were able to look at 3 different economic models that looked at what revenue this brought into the state. And all 3 of them found that locally owned and locally financed projects keep more money in the state than do large-scale projects owned by out-of-state companies. One study found that this is 10 times more economic activity locally than out-of-state wind companies owning this. So when we did this, we put the facts into a report. We took it to the legislature. There was a coalition of groups pushing for this tax credit to be passed in Iowa, and this report was one thing that helped the bill get passed that created Iowa's Renewable Energy Production Tax Credit. And this is a tax credit that provides 1.5 cents for every kilowatt hour of electricity produced. It requires that the wind project be 51%, at least 51% owned by an Iowan, and be less than 2.5 megawatts in size, so small-scale, locally owned wind projects. It allowed for 90 megawatts of wind power. And within 2 weeks of becoming effective, it was fully subscribed. So it was a very popular program. The very next year, in 2006, the Iowa legislature doubled this, added another 90 megawatts. And then just last year, the legislature transferred another 150 megawatts into the program. So this program is now up to 330 megawatts for wind power. As of early this month, 194 of them were subscribed, so we only have 35 megawatts available left in this program. And although eligible, only one Iowa school has claimed any of these credits. Of August of last year, Luther College in Decorah, Iowa, got approved to put up a 2.5 megawatt wind turbine and to receive this credit for the power they produce. That not more schools are claiming this is a little bit surprising, because Iowa has also historically been a leader in the number of school-owned wind projects. And that's kind of brings me to my second point, when we have these policies in place, there's also Iowans who have taken the sometimes arduous process of getting a turbine installed in their own community school. 10 schools have done this. And I want to sort of share the examples of how this persistence and passion has paid off to the benefit of these schools. The first school to put up their turbine was Spirit Lake in 1993. They now have 2 turbines, and not only were they a pioneer in that sense, they were also a pioneer in incorporating this renewable energy production into their classroom curriculum to teach their students about wind power. They've used their turbines as material for their first grade classes. They write books and draw pictures of their wind turbines. They use them in speech classes to debate energy policy. They use them in their computer classes. They created a website that describes the wind turbines and maintains the statistics about their production. They also have used it in statistics classes to look at the production, and their government classes have gone to the Iowa legislature to lobby for rules to allow more schools to install turbines. So they've really made it a part of their curriculum. Nevada School in Iowa got both of their turbines due to the generosity of a local family. They donated both the turbines to the school, and because they saw the success of these at Spirit Lake. Central Community School District got their community behind them to put up their turbine. They held a barbecue, and the community donated items, and they had an auction to raise part of the money to get their turbine. Another interesting fact about Central is that it's in a really sparsely populated area of the state, and so they've often been under the threat of consolidation, but having this turbine offset some of the building's costs has allowed them to keep their school open. Forest City was one of the first schools to get a fairly large turbine. They put up a 600 kilowatt turbine in 1999. And this came about because a junior chose for his physics project to get an instrument installed on top of the town's water tower that would measure the wind speed and allow them to determine if it's feasible to put up a wind turbine there. The student then presented the information to the city council and the school board, and he went on to serve on a task force that discussed the feasibility and how to design this project. So there's just different ways for the community and local people to take these projects on and really get them installed, do a positive thing for their community. And the turbine has really worked out well for the school. On a windy day, of which there are about 100 a year in Forest City, the school can save $600 on electricity costs. Akron-Westfield also came about because a group of students were involved in measuring wind speeds and doing analysis and designing the project. And the community has got another benefit there in that at night when school is out and the school isn't using as much of electricity power, that it can actually power their whole town, the school's turbine. Clarion Goldfield has a small turbine and is really an example of the persistence it takes. They wanted to put up a turbine in the early 90s, but were unable to get their utility to allow them to net meter or to pay them on a one-for-one basis to offset any power that they purchased from their utility, so it was making it cost prohibitive for them to do it. So the school spent 4 years arguing their case in front of the Iowa Utility Board, the Iowa District Court, the Iowa Supreme Court, and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission before the utility was finally required to allow them to put up their turbine and to provide them with net metering. But they got their turbine and they're proud of it. Eldora-New Providence, the superintendent there told me that it was the only project that he did in his 40-year educational career that got 100% community approval. And then he also told me that there's a retirement home next to the school, and whenever, on a day when the turbine's blades might not be turning for whatever reason, he gets calls from the residents there saying, why isn't their turbine working? So there's some community ownership of these things as well. And then Iowa Lakes Community College is the last one I'll talk about. They were the first community college to put up a turbine, and they combined their turbine with an associate's degree program that trains people in wind energy technology and allows them to get good jobs in their community. And it has really been a successful program for the college and for the students. So the primary motivation for each of these, or most of these schools for installing the turbine was to save money for education. But they have reaped other benefits as well. For each of these schools, their turbine has become a source of community pride. They've been able to incorporate their turbines into their curriculums. They have reduced their environmental impact, and they've become a model for their community. So together, Iowa's 10 school turbines only account for 5.5 megawatts. That's a really small portion of the 3,600 megawatts that we have installed in Iowa. And it tells you that there's, with the huge number of schools in Iowa, there's a lot of room for expansion here. And while certainly not foregoing the benefits of large wind farms in Iowa and what we can reap from that, Iowa should recognize the additional benefits of small-scale, locally owned wind power and start them operating at their small farms, in their neighborhoods, with schools, locally owned businesses, and local governments. And we need new policies to do this. Our tax credit is, once again, almost fully subscribed. There's been no school to install a turbine since 2005. Other states are moving forward in this area, and Iowa needs new policies to do so too. And I think you already have this from the information that Colin provided you, but if you're interested in the school projects or anything else I've talked about, it's on our website.